I said, I'm willing to wear the wire and bring you the information on that tape that Mr. Nusayr asked me to build the bomb, if that's what you're concerned about, but I don't testify in court. He said, no, then go home. I said, go home? The people asking me to build a bomb, you're telling me, and I'm the only one who is giving you ears and eyes inside the cell, you tell me go home? He said, yes, go home. I said, okay. And I told the 3 agents who were standing at the door of Mr. Banbar, I said, okay, I'm going home, but if the bomb got built on and went off, don't come and knock on my door.
Hello everyone, that was ex-Egyptian army officer Emad Salem. In the early 1990s, Salem infiltrated the terrorist cell of the blind sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. He did this for the FBI and reported back to them on Rahman's plans for a campaign of kidnappings, assassinations and bombings in New York City, providing information which could have been used to stop the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. However, as we've just heard Salem state, rather than utilize this information, the FBI, and in particular the head of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, Carson Dunbar, dismissed him, then failed to follow up on any of the leads he provided. What could possibly have been the reason for this? That's the question I'll be putting to Adam Fitzgerald in this latest episode of our series, as he explains the wider context of the 1993 bombing. He starts off by explaining more about Emad Salem himself.
Emad Salem was a former Egyptian officer who moved to New York City in 1987 from Egypt. Emad had worked a couple of jobs in New York, but in 1991, he found himself situated as head of security at the Woodward. The Woodward was an old Pure Arts hotel on Broadway, downtown Manhattan. In August of 91, an FBI agent by the name of Nancy Floyd, who was head of the Foreign Intelligence Office and was looking for a Russian diplomat who may have stood in the area, and she inquired about whether this Russian unnamed diplomat was staying at the Woodward, and she gave her card to Emad Salem. And to her surprise, Emad Salem called Floyd back days later, informed her that the Russian that they were looking for was there, but the INS had not informed the FBI about him being there. Floyd came away impressed at Salem's investigation and intuition, and she asked him if he was interested in becoming a source within the FBI and within the Joint Terrorism Task Force. He accepted, but there were some conditions. He told her about his background. Salem seemed to have found what he was looking for. He actually wanted to impress upon the superiors there that he had deeper intelligence ties with the Egyptian military, to have his talents finally being used instead of working these menial jobs. He was now being courted by the FBI and the New York Terrorism Task Force to become an intelligence agent, an asset. One day he suggested to Nancy Floyd that the FBI should start investigating into an Egyptian who was more dangerous than any Russian spy or diplomat. And Floyd was completely ignorant when it came to Middle East Islamic fundamentalism. Salem uttered the name Omar Abdel Rahman, who became the blind sheikh to Nancy Floyd. And then from there, Salem gave her a crash course regarding who Abdel Rahman was, the dangers he possessed, and where he was. Floyd was completely flabbergasted. It was overwhelming and shocking that no one in the FBI, especially in the New York field office, knew that Rahman was even inside the country, let alone the danger he possessed in the country itself, and how he got to the country was through the U.S. visa application, which he was on a terrorist watch list, but it was accepted by the CIA. Salem was seen as a valuable asset, one that could very well be tasked to collect pertinent information. Floyd introduced Salem to FBI agent John Etisev and Joint Terrorism Task Force NYPD Detective Napoli. And together, just them two, they headed the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force. And they didn't have any superiors, it was just them two. So it was here that they began making Emad Salem a full-on informant who would work inside the Al Farouk Mosque, where Omar Abdel Rahman teached. And Salem agreed to go undercover and work with the terrorist task force, but he had one condition, and he didn't want his identity disclosed nor to testify against the assailants because he feared that these people, and rightfully so, that they would come find him and his family, who still lived in Egypt, and kill them. So Salem told Floyd in Napoli that he'd be willing to wear a wire if they could promise he'd never have to appear in open court. So the FBI agreed to use Salem purely as an intelligence asset. If he developed information that a crime was about to be committed, agents would then move in, do the necessary surveillance to make a case. Salem then became a member of the Al Farouk Mosque. During the months that he became known as like a trusted confidant within the top members of the group, which included Mahmoud Abalima, who was nicknamed the Red because he had full red hair, one of the founding members of the Al-Qifa Refugee Center, and a top prominent Imam Ali Shanawi, and Ibrahim al-Gabroni. He would become the Blind Sheikh's most entrusted bodyguard and driver only because of his connection to Egyptian intelligence, and he himself was an Egyptian, much like Omar Abdel Rahman was. He would drive Rahman around the cities like Detroit, Tampa Bay, Arizona. He would drive often. You would hear him talk about in the various plots, and one in which, while he was driving to Detroit, while he was wearing a wire at this point, and Rahman insinuated that he wanted the Egyptian president Hosni Mubarak assassinated by rifle. Salem would record all this, but somehow the recordings would be botched, and he couldn't complete the recording itself. In time, Salem would then visit Al Said Nusayr, and he would receive calls from him also, which the FBI, by the way, monitored both his visits and calls. It was here that Salem would recall that Nusayr had plans for bombing of 12 Jewish locations, including banks, businesses, and neighborhoods in Brooklyn, all around Manhattan as well. This would include, later on, the bombing of New York City landmarks, in which Omar Abdel Rahman confided to Salem one evening. But Salem would run into constant problems, and one of them was the constant unavailability of Anti-7 News Napoli. Because Salem would begin his operations at night, Anti-7 Napoli would already be off work, and they wouldn't answer the call. Since Salem did not wear a wire, he would call Nancy Floyd in all hours of the night relating information. Meanwhile, Floyd wasn't his handler, but she took on that job that Anti-7 Napoli seemingly couldn't. But the FBI grew suspicious of Salem's relationship with Floyd. And it would later be noted that the FBI didn't trust Floyd, for one, because she was a woman, and two, is that she became the most trusted confidant to Salem. Meanwhile, the FBI wanted that availability, but they couldn't, because he didn't trust them, and they didn't trust him. And most assuredly, the FBI most assuredly opined that Floyd was harboring intelligence, the human intelligence from Salem. One evening, one of the Blind Sheikh's top members, Ibrahim al-Gabroni, asked Salem if he knew how to build a bigger bomb, a huge, much bigger bomb. And Salem responded that he could, since he worked for the Egyptian top military unit. After a while of stalling on the bomb, Salem then went to Abalima. He went to back with Abalima and said that he has a feeling he was being followed by the FBI. This would give him an out. And it worked, by the way. The Blind Sheikh told Salem to go into hiding for a couple of months. But during this, meanwhile, the FBI terminated Salem. Carson Dunbar was head of the New York field office, terminated Salem as an informant. And Salem persisted, he disagreed with this. And during a phone call with Nancy Floyd, he relayed an ominous message. And he stated, quote, "Don't call me when the bombs go off," end quote.
Yeah, so the FBI's handling of this, and just in the segment we've looked at so far, it's incredible, or incredulous even. They'd rigged the van up with listening devices and picked up on the Blind Sheikh plotting the assassination of the Egyptian president Mubarak, and then they messed up the recording. I believe they didn't record the conversation Salem had at the prison with Al Said Nasser, even though they could have done, where he basically he confessed to the assassination of Maya Kahani. They missed that one. Salem, in his book, is absolutely damning of Carson Dunbar, this guy that comes in from a different unit to run counterterrorism in the New York office. And Dunbar, even knowing this plot is going ahead, pulls out the inside man. The FBI's actions are completely inexplicable from the outside looking in. And I hear them attributed to, you mentioned sexism. Salem feels they were quite racist against him because he was a Middle Easterner. I think Dunbar talked about him coming there with sand in his shoes and telling him how to do his job. Petty and incompetent. The FBI come out of this just looking awful, just absolutely awful. But we'll return at the end maybe to that kind of assessment. Let's carry on at the narrative for a moment. So Salem is out. He won't wear the wire. They put him through lie detector tests, which he says as an Egyptian military officer, he knew how to throw them, how to give inconclusive results. And he was annoyed that they wanted him to do this, and he doesn't let people get inside his mind. So he deliberately threw the results, and they chucked him out. This $500 a week informant. And then the blind sheikh takes a course of action to bring another bomb maker in. Is that a good place to pick up the narrative?
Yeah, sure. In fact, I'll lead off with that. When Emad Salem was out, the information went back to Abdul Rahman that they needed another replacement, and quite soon. Omar Abdul Rahman actually called an imam trusted imam in Pakistan, and stated that, do you know anybody that could come to the United States right away to do some business here? And they suggested, yes, give you Abdul Basit Mahmoud Abdul Karim, and his other surname would be Ramzi Yousef. And everybody knows him as Ramzi Yousef, but his real name, his birth name, was Abdul Basit Mahmoud Abdul Karim. He would have many surnames over the course of history down the line, but he was born that. Yousef is somewhat of a malevolent figure. Many believe he was born in Baluchistan, Pakistan, or Kuwait, but it's not relatively known. He went by many names, and he would later have an famous uncle who would have later ramification of history, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But Ramzi Yousef went to a university in United Kingdom. He also went to Oxford for electrical engineering to learn English as well. He then traveled to Peshawar, learned about bomb making, and he went to a terrorist training camp there, Aldine. He would later learn about bomb making material, how to convert them into watches, soda cans, and whatnot. He was very skilled in that. But he was also known as a bungler as well, one that didn't really refine his skills. I'll bring this up in a little bit. But while he was at the Philippines, Ramzi Yousef went to the Philippines to train members of Abu Sayyaf and the Moro group. It would be a government undercover operative named Edward Angeles, who would later testify that he saw Ramzi Yousef in the Philippines running a training camp there with Mohammed Jamal Khalifa, who, by the way, was bin Laden's brother-in-law and a known terrorist authority. But Abdul Rahman needed an immediate replacement for Salem, and Yousef agreed to come to the United States. On September 1st, 1992, Yousef arrived at JFK Airport along with Ahmed Ajaj, a fellow who's a more shady character and who is even more experienced bomb maker than himself. But Ajaj was a counterfeiter in the West Bank. He was born in the West Bank and was recruited by the Israeli Mossad to help infiltrate Palestinian groups. He was given a release after a short time, then became involved in infiltrating Arab terrorist centers. He met Yousef while in Pakistan. Now, while Yousef was using a faulty Iraqi passport, immediately requested political asylum from the Iraqi government. Meanwhile, Ajaj was even a more manipulated passport that fell apart, and while inspection of his luggage, they found bomb-making material, documents, videos of terrorist training manuals. He was held in detention, while meanwhile Yousef was held for 72 hours and repeatedly interrogated. But the INS holding cells were overcrowded. And while he was released under the persistence and negation of one female INSA officer, he was given a trial date, which of course he never went to. And seemingly he was given a free taxi ride. He had no money left So he was given a free taxi ride by an Arab he met outside the airport detention center and driven to the Al Farouk Mosque.
Okay,
So
just let me pause you for a second, because this is
sure.
one of those points that people find, again, hard to believe about the whole story, that a judge came in, I think I'm saying his name right there, with everything but a cap on, saying, I am a terrorist. He had the manuals in his bag and everything, and no one made the connection between him and Ramzi Yousef. No one thought, hey, is he traveling alone? And Ramzi Yousef was let go. And that's... So I have heard the suggestion that Ajaz was there to take attention, like you hear of drugs mules. They send someone through with a little bit of cocaine strapped to their body, so the suitcase of cocaine, that the person with the little gets caught, and then the whole suitcase or the truckload goes through uninterrupted. Was that a conscious plan, that Ajaz would get caught to allow Yousef through, or?
Yeah, because remember, it was Yousef who was being called upon by the blind sheikh, and in order to allow him entry, was that a judge had to make himself known. As you said, somewhat more obvious, that the attention of the agents would focus on him rather than Yousef.
I didn't know about his Mossad connection.
It's actually he was actually counterfeiting dollars in the West Bank, and he was arrested. And Mossad agents actually, Peter Lance writes this in the book that you're currently reading, 1,000 Years for Revenge. He states that Ajad was confronted by Mossad agents, and that he would become a valuable asset, would form, because Ajad wasn't religious himself. He was primarily coming from a more moderate background. His family lived in the West Bank as well. So Ajad, they gave Ajad, instead of 5 years in prison, they gave Ajad an ultimatum: we could release you, but you have to inform us about these Palestinian groups that are residing abroad and in the Middle East itself. And he agreed. And he infiltrated these, especially the PLO, and gave them information there. But they found out that Yousef was traveling to the United States. So they persuaded Ajad to go along with the infiltration of the Al Farouk Mosque, and he did. Because also, to talk about, he has to also know that he's going to be arrested and charged with the bombing itself, because he actually goes along with it, and he's given 24 years.
Am I understanding this correctly? You're saying he was going there at the behest of Mossad. He was working for Mossad when he entered the United States.
Yes, I think he has links with the Mr. Green.
Okay. What became of him? Did he get a lengthy prison sentence in?
Oh, I mean, there's not much information regarding a judge. I actually did a profile on him on my Facebook page regarding the background of it as best as I could, but there's little known documentation regarding a judge himself, which leads me to believe, because Yousef actually calls a judge numerous times in his prison cell regarding how to build a bomb, because I think Ahmed Judge is a much more skilled bomb maker than Yousef. Yousef actually, I'll talk about in later interviews, where he blows up bombs in his hand. He actually loses part of his eye. He burns himself 30% of his body regarding a bomb that he's trying to build to kill Pakistan Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. But there's numerous instances where he bungles up bombs himself. Yeah. So I'll talk about that later. But a judge, he keeps calling a judge from his prison cell that he's paid, but the judge actually is later released and given back more profoundly. Is given back the suitcase and the belongings and everything that was in it, the bomb-making manuals, terrorism.
That's right, I remember that now, yeah.
And he gets all that back under the protest of the New York City prosecuting attorney, Mary Jo White, who's head of the New York City general attorney there.
Okay, so did he get released, do you think, because of his connections to an intelligence agency, Mossad or another one?
I'll leave that up to you. I don't have concrete evidence to suggest so I'm going to say we'll leave that with a grain of salt.
Okay.
But it is shocking to note that here's a guy who gets caught, and most assuredly is there as a patsy, and so said Yousef can get away. The judge gets caught with all this incriminating evidence, which would, of course, lead to believe that he's a terrorist, obviously, with all the manuals and videos that he has. But profoundly, He gets released, and he gets back all the terrorism manuals and videos into his person much later. And he gets a job as a pizza delivery driver in Texas. That's where he lives. He goes to Texas and he lives there. And Yousef still stays in contact with him. It just goes to show you that, like, how in the world did this guy not get a longer prison sentence, or just, you know, or stays in prison with no bail whatsoever, but yet he's free. And it has to come at the behest of someone much higher than the New York City Attorney General's office or the U.S. Attorney General's office, because why else would he be released?
Okay.
Not, like I said, believe that with a grain of salt.
And it's unclear what happened to him from that point onwards then.
Right. It's very little to go with. They only know that, I'm pretty sure that he's followed at this point, but by either Israeli intelligence or by U.S. intelligence, but he's not given the prominent primary attention that someone like Yousef has. But he's most likely in the shadows, so to speak.
Okay.
It's just there's a lot of questionable suspicion regarding Ahmadinejad that isn't given due attention.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. Okay, so back to Yousef then. He arrives at the Al-Qita Refugee Center, the Al Farouk Mosque, and gets to work on this plot, presumably. So what's his story and involvement and role then in the World Trade Center bombing?
Right. Well, Yousef immediately aids in the building of the urea nitrate bomb. Only he would know, along with Omar Abdel-Rahman, where the bomb would be placed until he informs the others on the day of the attack. And it would be the World Trade Center. Yousef, from here, we routinely call Hajjaj from his apartment, in which Yousef stayed in New Jersey. Hajjaj would assist Yousef in making the bomb by phone, as well as the physical labor, which came from Emad Salem and Mahmoud Abalima. So they began assembling it would be a 1,500-pound urea nitrate fuel oil device. And the construction of the bomb would take place in a storage facility in New Jersey where they lived. Yousef would have would order the ingredients needed to take place in a storage facility, would have them delivered there without any problem. Salome would use his car, which was a Sherry Nova, to ferry like the nitric acid and the urea between the factory where they ordered it to the storage facility where they built it. Salami would turn out, by the way, to be one hell of a horrible driver. He was driving an accident where Yousef would be temporarily hospitalized. Meanwhile, during this, Hajjaj would be released to give him back the suitcase and whatnot, to the shock and dismay of the federal prosecutors in New York. And from there, on the day, February 26, 1993, Salami would rent a Ryder truck using his name, giving his address in New Jersey. By the way, his address in New Jersey and the phone number that he would give the apartment where he rented was from a landlord named Josie Haddad, who would later turn out to be a Mossad operative. Abdel Rahman Yassin would be driving the truck to the parking garage of the World Trade Center in the North Tower because Salami was such a horrible driver, they didn't trust him.
Okay, so just run that by me one more time. Who was renting an apartment from a Mossad agent in this?
Okay, it was Mohammed Salome. Mohammed Salome would rent this New Jersey apartment from Josie Haddad, who was the landlord. Josie Haddad would turn out to be a Mossad agent himself. And how this came to be, which is documents that are redacted, it's not known, and no investigative attention was given to Josie Haddad because on the day of the bombing, Haddad flees the country, actually, and there was no follow-up through regarding Haddad itself. The phone number that was given to Haddad is also redacted in the FBI report. To this day itself, it's still redacted. That's 26 years later.
Right, so already we have two pretty substantial Mossad connections.
Right. What you're seeing is much like 9/11, you're seeing that the Israeli intelligence are following around these Arab terrorist cells. So it's almost like they're trying to see if the operation goes according to plan and whether it happens. Because remember, also too, that this 9/11, this 1993 bombing is blamed on the Palestinians themselves. because Yousef actually called in and stated that it's coming from the Palestinian Liberation Front, and it turns out to be just a small little group itself. But you can see that where the blame is going to. Remember on 9/11 itself, that when the Mossad operatives get arrested on the New Jersey Turnpike, the driver, Oded Elner, states to the cop, as soon as he gets out of the car, goes, "We are not your problem. The Palestinians are your problem. Your problems are our problems." So what I'm trying to do is, there is a correlation between Israeli operatives in the 1993 bombing and the 9/11 bombing, where they're trying to blame Palestinians themselves. But the Palestinians themselves would have no link to either the operations themselves. Go ahead.
Yousef's motivation was specifically Palestine. I think this is an interesting point, that he wasn't an especially Islamic terrorist. He was a sort of nominal Muslim who liked women and wine and a bit of the high life, and said he valued a lot of the kind of society that existed in the United States over, say, a severely religious society, in contrast to the Blind Sheikh, who was a real fundamentalist. His Yousef's stated motivation was principally around the support the United States gives to the state of Israel and their then suppression and victimization of the Palestinian people. And he saw US citizens as being culpable because of their taxation that they pay to the US government.
That's correct. In fact, during his sentencing, not to go off track, but during his sentencing, he does make that quite clear. Yousef, he states that the reason for the attacks is that the United States has committed atrocities toward the Palestinians in primarily being a strong ally to the state of Israel, which are afflicting these human dispositions toward the Palestinian people in the West Bank and in Jenin itself. But with these harsh conditions itself, remember also too, just to reinforce your point, that Yousef himself was not a religious person. He was actually someone who's using these terrorist tactics to gain a political strategy, to geopolitical strategy, to persuade the United States what they were doing and what they were doing toward the Palestinians themselves. He also brings up as well the plight of the Iraqi people, and that their economic sanctions, which led to so many people being killed, children being killed and whatnot. Bin Laden also relates to this as well. But yes, Yousef was not very religious at all. Although the Blind Sheikh himself was religious, but it also is ironic that the intelligence apparatus, the CIA, is involved with Rahman, not with Yousef himself. But there is also conflicting evidence to suggest that the CIA did get to Yousef while he was in Pakistan, but there really isn't any concrete evidence to suggest so. But it is suggested by ex-CIA agents that he did. Whether you want to believe that, I'll leave that up to you.
Okay, well, maybe we'll touch on that in a bit. Just, we'll come on to the actual day of the bombing in a minute then, but just through this period where Yousef is constructing the bomb and forming the plot, the FBI missed various opportunities to intercept again, even in the absence of their inside man, Emad Salem. There were these conversations going back to I've forgotten his name, the fellow in prison.
You talk about Ahmadinejad?
Ajad, yeah. That's going on, and yeah, they weren't tracking people involved in the cell. Can you speak to some of that, the missed opportunities?
Well, surely this was a bungled operation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When Emad Salem was terminated as an informant, the FBI lost their eyes and ears, of course, inside the cell. John Antisep and Lou Napoli tried their best to keep up with the cell itself. And on the day of when the bombing was to take place, they followed the van, and supposedly they lost the tracking of the van itself from New Jersey to Manhattan. Whether you want to believe that or not, I'll leave that up to you, whether they truly lost the tracking of the rider truck or whatnot. But the FBI seems to bungle up most of what happened with the 1993 operation when it comes to Ahmadinejad, when it comes to the Al Farouk Mosque members, and when it comes to Ramzi Yousef itself, they really either, I would happen to believe more so that they just didn't have necessary manpower or the ideal goals of trying to defuse the cell rather than say that they were involved in the cell itself. Because this is what a lot of people within the quote-unquote truther groups, they like to say that the FBI itself was involved with the terrorist plot of bombing the World Trade Center. I think that's ludicrous. I just think that they bungled this operation. We want to say that there were other intelligence operatives that were in the know, sure, but the FBI was not.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, because there is this. I mean, maybe we should just touch upon that. Some of the recordings Emad Salem made, because he started recording his conversations with his FBI handlers because he was scared they were going to bump him off ultimately, or blame him, frame him.
Can I just interrupt you, Richard? That came when Emad Salem came back.
Yes, yeah, I know it's a little later, but I'm mentioning it now because some of the recordings, if you took a snip of them, it sounded like Emad Salem was saying he built the bomb on behalf of the FBI that went off in the Trade Center, and that even got on the evening news at one point and became quite a big conspiracy trope. That did the FBI build the bomb? And straightforward, the answer is no to that. Right? They didn't. Yousef came in and built the bomb that went off at a later point. It was Emad Salem's English wasn't quite as good, and it just sounded a bit confused.
That's right. In fact, this is a great point you bring up, and I want to make this quite clear. That people within these truther groups like to say that the FBI helped build the bomb. But no, this is two separate instances. When it comes to Yousef's bomb, Yousef, Abilima, and others helped build that bomb, Salami and others. They built the bomb in a New Jersey warehouse. They had that warehouse bugged, but when Salem was terminated as an informant, they took out all the cameras, all the bugs, and they didn't follow anymore. They just bungled that operation. When Salem came back into the fold after the World Trade Center bombing of 1993, then they gave the other cell, the Mosque members, the cell, to build the bomb. But they gave them false blasting caps, a powder that wasn't bombing, it was false powder, in order to implicate them in the landmark plot, which I'll get into in another interview. Yes, there was two different distinct areas, the 1933 bombing and the landmark plot. The FBI was involved with the landmark plot, not with the 1993.
Okay, so the day of the bombing itself then, if we're okay to move on to that, the 26th of February 1993, talk us through what happened.
Now, given the task to drive the truck was Abdul Rahman Yassin, because they didn't trust the army. Yassin drove the truck to a parking lodge in the North Tower. They parked at the underground B2 level. Yousef ignited this 20-foot fuse. And as they got into an adjoining car, which they were to get away, they were met right at the edge of the parking garage where there was traffic leading out into the streets. And according to Peter Lance's book, 1,000 Years for Revenge, they state that the participants in the car were all losing their nerve, so to speak. Abilima actually, I think he was the passenger, he actually gets out and he's like nervous, he's trying to rush the truck. Meanwhile, Yousef, according to Peter Lance, is really just a nervous steel. And he doesn't really care that if he gets killed in a bomb, he doesn't even sweat it. But they leave, and at 12:17, the bomb ignites. Now, the plan was to have the North Tower crash into the South Tower, causing maximum damage to Lower Manhattan and killing thousands of people. However, the bomb was placed in a spot where the beams were not compromised, and it ended up killing 6 people and injuring over 1,000. 3 of the people that were killed were in this lunchroom, which is about, I'm going to get this wrong, but I'm going to say approximately 300 feet where the point of impact, the explosion came from. And one was a pregnant woman, 2 were men, one was a middle-aged Hispanic man who just got married, I believe, and they were killed gruesomely because the bomb itself sent shockwaves through the room. And being that they were hit with the concrete itself, they exploded from the inside out. And the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the FBI, actually, when they investigated the gas, they found human remains splattered among the walls itself. But
yeah, it was only when I watched a documentary on this recently, I didn't realize, because you hear 6 people and you think it sounds like a fairly localized thing to a relatively small area of the building, but the whole building was affected because smoke rose up throughout it. There were people trapped in elevators for hours. There were children trapped on the roof for hours and hours in the freezing cold, and like 1,000 people. That's coming from the smoke inhalation. So it was a huge thing. And there was a superficial kind. Well, there was a sanity in Yousef's madness, right? In that, because when I initially, heard of this whole thing, it's like, well, how do you think you're going to stop US support to Israel by setting a bomb off at the World Trade Center? But his thing was that the bombs the US dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed about 100,000 people each, and that caused the Japanese to surrender. So he figured that if he could cause one trade center to topple into the other, to topple over New York, you could get into the hundreds of thousands of casualties potentially. And if then this inspired further attacks, pretty soon the United States would have to surrender. And it's completely bonkers, but you can see there's a superficial kind of logic to this, evil insanity, right?
Sure, and while at the same time, just to add to it, he also states that the World Trade Center is seen as like the epicenter of Jewry itself in the financial district.
Right.
He also saw that by knocking down these towers, you're knocking down in a sense, you're knocking down the might of the United States, because the World Trade Center is considered the largest building in the United States, and that they see when you knock these down, you can knock down the power of the United States in a sense.
In a symbolic way.
Right,
I've heard different views as to how close they came from a urea nitrate bomb didn't stand a chance of bringing the towers down to, if they just placed it in a different position, it might have done exactly that, or it might have caused this. I'm not from New York, so apparently there's a barrier there that stops the Hudson River doing something, and that could have fractured and flooded the whole place. What's your view on how close they might have come? Because I think it's quite relevant to understanding it, really.
Sure, it was the FBI that stated later on that if he just parked 200 feet, I think it was eastward, from going, no, it's 200 feet west of where he came in at. There's a section where there's like 4 beams. So the southern beam is one beam that actually holds southern part of the North Tower. If he parked there, he might have had a chance to have the tower lean. But the towers were made to have impact from planes, where it almost like a flycatcher net, where there's a object that goes into it, it would sway instead of having the building solidified and strengthened, where it could just take off parts and come down. The impact of like blows of like 707s that didn't have full capacity, if they crashed into the World Trade Center, it would just sway into the building. And actually, the building did sway. The North Tower did sway when the bomb went off. And most of the injuries were smoke-related injuries. In fact, one person I personally know, he's a friend of mine on Facebook, I won't say his name, but he was actually a middle schooler. He was actually in the elevator, and the elevator stopped, and he was there for 7 hours. And he was trapped there. But according to the FBI, yeah, if Yousef just parked, I think Yousef miscalculated. But remember, Yousef also didn't do his due diligence and really investigate where he wanted to park the bomb. It leads me to believe that Yousef wasn't a very good long-term planner. He might have been a good manager of organizing these plots. He really, I think, could have done a lot more damage. And he says later on that if he just had enough money, supposedly he's in a helicopter, he's in a plane after he gets caught going into Madden by the FBI, and he states the FBI agent who's looking at him, who says that you didn't knock these down, he says, if I had enough money, I would have. So even though he had necessary funds to build the bomb, it just leads to believe that his money actually came from the Farouk box. Why didn't he get the necessary funding from the mosque itself to build a bigger bomb.
Yeah, because they weren't short of money, were they?
Right, because yeah, they weren't short on money. But remember too, this goes into contradiction that when Blind Sheikh is going around the country itself, he's actually getting funding from notable mosques, Islamic mosques in Tucson, in Detroit, in Tampa Bay, in Jersey, in New York. He's getting all this money. Where's this money going? Well, it's going to funding these plots. But reasonably, how on earth did he not get the necessary funding to build a bigger bomb? But I think it was just a timing factor itself that they wanted to rush this operation and get something going. And I think that was the reason why Yousef didn't build a bigger bomb. Whether that's the case, I'm just assuming here. I think that's a reasonable scenario itself.
Yeah, just to be clear on that point about the funding, the Blind Sheikh was presenting this as supporting Islamism overseas, or it was presented as an Islamic charity setup, right? I mean, he wasn't going around saying we're going to blow up the World Trade Center for the funding.
Right. Actually, he actually wants to build the Al-Qifa Mosque, the Al-Qifa Refugee Center bigger. He wanted to build more mosques around the country, especially in New Jersey and New York. He actually wanted to become a prime emir inside the United States.
Right, yeah.
Meanwhile, also, too, he's getting funding from the Maktab al-Khidmat as well, which was the Pakistan recruitment office that was recruiting Mujahideen into the Soviet Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. But remember, that even though the war ended, that center was still getting funding from notable high-ranking Saudi officials in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere as well. So it leads me to believe that also, too, that the operation for 1993, much like 9/11, I believe was supposed to be much bigger, but that they just didn't have the time to carry out these operations. Also, too, remember that I also mentioned in a future interview that it was also supposed to be landmark plot. It was supposed to be much bigger too than what the World Trade Center plot was to get maximum casualties. I believe Yousef actually, in his sentencing, he said that he wanted to cause 25,000 deaths. Whether that was a number he created, I don't know, but it seems reasonable itself.
Just to say, with regard to the planning, the mosque had a man inside the New York Fire Department, right, an accountant who was getting documents out on the architecture of New York City buildings and landmarks and such.
Right. You know what? And I was thinking about the name off the top of my head. I can't get it. And geez, I can't remember his name. Yes, that's right. He actually gets blueprints, and he actually gives them to Omar Abdel-Rahman. And this is for the landmark plot, actually.
It's a landmark plot, okay. Is that, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll you know what?
We'll come back to that for the landmark plot, and I wasn't sure about the chronology of that. So back to Yousef then. He flees the country.
Right. He goes back to Pakistan. Meanwhile, the FBI was able to retrieve the VIN number from the Ryder truck's axle, which shockingly survived the blast. And
I don't know if we mentioned, but they rented a truck, right? They rented a Ryder truck. Yeah.
Salami rents the Ryder truck.
That was a controversial decision, wasn't it? Because they actually kind of the FBI agents don't think the word is tampering with a crime scene, but they saw the opportunity to get some vital evidence and went for it. And there was a disagreement within the agents on the ground there, but it turned out to be, well, highly relevant. They got the number and traced the truck.
That's correct. In fact, they didn't expect the axle to survive, but they found the axle survived. It was mangled, but they unbelievably got the VIN number. I don't know how it survived itself, but it was just like a sheer choice of luck that they got it. And then when they traced the VIN number back to this Ryder truck company, Jersey, which was rented, Salami astonishingly went back for the Ryder truck deposit, which was
this is these Ramzi Yousef's co-conspirator, the one that couldn't drive.
Right.
And this
That's right.
is perhaps the most incredulous and unbelievable part of this entire story.
This like defies common sense. You would think that these people would have enough money to get money and flee the country, which I've seen did. He flew to Iraq, Yousef went to Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Abilima and Al-Gabroni and the rest of the Al-Farouk mosques who went back into their native New York and New Jersey. Salami, astonishingly, he's going to flee the country, but he didn't have enough money. He didn't have any money whatsoever. So he went back for the deposit of $200 because he couldn't afford a flight ticket to escape.
Yeah, now, Ramzi Yousef flew out first class, just to make it clear there wasn't like a shortage of money.
Right, he wasn't short of that much money, but he had enough to escape to Pakistan first class.
So similar to how Yousef came into the country, was this a setup again, right?
This is. I also want to be very careful here. Now, whether you want to say that this was a setup for Salami and the rest of the Farouk Mosque members to get arrested, and because they really didn't know who Ramzi Yousef was, and Ramzi Yousef was his actual name, so he was given an alias, and they didn't know anything really about him. Whether this was to focus the FBI on them and not on Ramzi Yousef, that seems plausible.
So yeah, I'm sorry. We probably should just develop the narrative a bit more. He went back and had this ridiculous conversation trying to get some money out of the rental agency, but he didn't know he was talking to an FBI agent.
That's right.
At the time. And the guy does not come across as particularly bright in the transcript, right? Because he actually manages to argue himself down by about $50.
That's correct.
It's incredible.
He actually gets $150. And he had, actually the FBI waiting outside is like antsy, and they are hearing the conversation, which I think lasts 2 hours. But the guy behind the desk was an FBI agent posing as a Ryder truck employee. He's like milking it because he knows he's got Salemi captured and whatnot. He's like almost like gloating in the fact that he wants to get as much information out from him. But he's also making light of the situation. So he's actually waiting the other FBI agents out. When Salami actually goes down, he gets $150, then leaves. And then while he leaves, he gets arrested. And he gets arrested.
And the FBI nearly bundled that too, right? Because they accidentally informed the media about the rental truck, and they were having to misdirect media vans turning outside to record.
That's right. They were outside, right outside in view. Right, you're right about that. Actually, right outside in view, so they had to take the media trucks outside and park them like 2 blocks away. And I think that's the reason why that the FBI agent inside was actually talking to him for a while, so they could get the media outside. But it also leads back into your point. The FBI really were just like this bungling procurement, like these cops that you see in like TV and the media, these bungling cops that come out with these batons and large hats. They come out of the car looking silly, but not to make light of the subject itself, but the FBI really were like caught their pants down in this whole regard, because they almost blew this whole operation, and because of some blind luck, that they arrested Salami. But otherwise, I think they would have never caught anybody. Salami would have just had money; he would have left, and they would have still probably wouldn't have caught Ramzi Yousef later on down the road, because Salami actually gives them some information, which leads into Yousef's arrest, which I'll get into in another.
And they let the other fellow involved go, didn't they? Actually went to the apartment of Mahoud Abelina, and his roommate was there, and they didn't realize who they were talking to.
That's correct. In fact, they had no idea. In fact, a lot of these guys, they had no idea about the hierarchy of the Al Farouk Mosque. Al Gabroni, Hajjaj, they had no idea. They didn't know who Abu Limar was, because they lost the eyes and ears of Emad Salem. And because John Atashev and Louis Napoli just didn't have the necessary capabilities of following all these people around, it was like these people were like free to rein in their operations without any hesitation by the FBI itself. And it just goes to show you the lack of opportunities that the FBI had, and the New York City Joint Terrorism Task Force, which only had 2 people like Atashev and Napoli. They didn't have any superiors. They just didn't have the manpower, and they just didn't have necessary capabilities of having this wide ranging conspiracy involving Arab fundamentalism, which they had no idea existed.
Okay, so we're going to go on to the landmarks plot next time. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say on the narrative of these events this time. If so, please do. And if not, I've just got a couple of more open-ended questions to round off with.
Sure, if you have, I'll be happy.
Well, my first more open-ended one is I'd never really considered what was the impact on the United States as a result of this. Okay, because you've got the Cold War is not so long ago ended, and you've got the Clinton administration has come in. Okay, so and now you've got this terrorist event, and with the Oklahoma City bombing, I believe that did have an impact on some domestic legislation to do with law enforcement, and obviously September the 11th had a massive impact on everything, like foreign wars and the rolling out of the Patriot Act, indefinite detention about trial, all this kind of massive revolution, really, in the United States. I don't know anything about the impact of the 1993 bombing. What was there any? What was it? What changed as a consequence of?
I was in New York when that happened. Actually, when 93 bombing happened, it was a shock, and we really didn't. We were, as a country, we were completely ignorant to Arab fundamentalism, militant Islamic fundamentalism, and geopolicy regarding the region itself. So it was a shock to us, and I think that shock relented in the fact that when co-conspirators of the 93 bombing were arrested, the FBI foolishly and hurriedly stated that there was no wide-ranging Islamic conspiracy residing inside the United States. There was no huge organization that was willing to cause mass destruction. We caught everybody. In other words, they caught the guilty party, and that's it. That's the end of it. So there was no rush to create future legislation or regulations regarding our geopolity or our intelligence agencies regarding the matter itself, which was still residing in the country, but we had no idea. Whether you want to believe that the FBI really didn't have any idea, I think they did. Now, when it comes to CIA, they did. And they just didn't want to share that information with the FBI. And we see that most notably in the 9/11 operation, okay? More notably there than anywhere else. But regarding just sheer ignorance, which was regarding these terrorist cells operating in the United States, yes, the FBI was completely ignorant on a general basis regarding this. So that, you know, when they gave the press conference after the landmark plot, not the, you know, which I'll get into in the next interview, yeah, they even went on national TV and said that, you know, it's all over. But there was one person who wasn't an FBI agent, who was a fire department employee. His name was he's not going to kill me. Ronald Bucca, that's his name. Ronnie Bucca. Ronnie Bucca actually. Ronnie Bucca actually has in his house. He has this like this chart of like terrorist organizations, these cells, the Brooklyn cell that was operating. Abdel Rahman that was operating in the United States. He keeps files, and he relates this information to the FBI, and they just ignore him. And he states that when the FBI went on TV and says that there's no terrorist cell anymore, he then goes to New York City FBI office and says no, that the operation is still ongoing. These cells still exist. He just ignore them whatsoever.
Yeah, he was a kind of. I don't quite understand how this functions because he was a fire officer, but he was some sort of reserve special forces or military intelligence guy. He had
That's exactly right. Yes, he's actually in the intelligence field in the military, but he actually with these intelligence contacts as well, he's able to get the files that other ordinary people couldn't. So he's keeping files on Abdel Rahman, he's keeping files on the landmark plot Sadiq Ali, who's in charge of that. So he's keeping tracks upon these organizations that are in Egypt, that are in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and it's amazing that, you know, because his wife later on gives these files to the FBI later on. But during that time frame, they completely ignore him. They think that, you know, he's just some, you know, he's exaggerating, that there's no organizations operating inside the United States. Meanwhile, he has information that sure is, but the FBI completely ignores him. Now, this leads into the open-ended conspiracy theory that the FBI wanted this to happen and whatnot. I'm more the belief that they just didn't believe him, that they just...
Well, yeah, okay, that's my final question, the open-ended one then. with the assassinations we looked at last episode, we encountered the same thing, really, of a lot of FBI incompetence and an unwillingness to acknowledge the scale of the plot going on, right? Where always attributing the minimum to it, like it's a lone gunman, okay, and not a wider cell. And it's a limited phenomenon in terms of the bombing. It's not a really large Islamic terror threat that's taking place here. And yeah, you can look at that on one level and talk about, well, just FBI absence of resources, incompetence. But of course, you also know that the CIA brought Rahman into the country, and then you've got to ask the question, well, do they have an influence there? Are they diverting attention away from him? And one thing that occurred to me is that I'm certainly not saying the CIA wanted to do the bombing or did the bombing through this cell, right? But in a sense, it's kind of indistinguishable, because what would you expect to see if that was the case? You'd expect to see some agent within the FBI who's in charge of the investigation continuously bundling everything, turning off microphones when they should be on, pulling out the inside man who's going to ruin the whole thing, and a continuous series of errors, and then it goes off. So I'm not saying, and I'm really not saying that they wanted the bomb to go off, but it's kind of indistinguishable, right? And that's
right.
That's the dark tragedy of it. And you can certainly see why people would think, with all the incredulous points, there's got to be a deeper story here. There's got to be, you know. So I suppose that's my final question is there any sense you can get a handle of to what extent the CIA had any involvement in this, or Mossad, their monitoring? Because, you know, I would think that if the CIA brought someone like Rahman, the blind sheikh, into the country for their own geopolitical purposes, he could be handy for the situation that might emerge in Egypt. You'd want to keep him on a fairly tight leash, right? You'd want to have his whereabouts booked. You'd want to have some sort of inside man there monitoring him. Now, maybe they don't. Maybe they're just callous or unconcerned of that, or didn't foresee the problems it would cause. But you know, speaking to that, are we just talking about FBI incompetency, or do you think there was, for whatever reason, the CIA restricting the actions of the FBI and law enforcement?
I think it's a combination of both. And I think the FBI was completely shorthanded when it comes to the topic of Arab fundamentalism. These organizations that are operating within the country itself that cause an existential threat to the security of the nation. I just don't think the FBI had the necessary manpower to combat this. Now, I think also, too, the CIA itself, which, by the way, still saw Rahman as a valuable asset, even inside the United States. But remember this, I have to make this quite clear. The CIA is not permitted illegally to collect intelligence concerning the domestic activities of U.S. citizens, which they remain silent to this day, their close connections to the blind sheikh. Now, in 2008, there was an executive order 13470, which would authorize the CIA to conduct counterintelligence activity without assuming or performing internal security functions within the U.S., because it's illegal to do so. The CIA can't conduct surveillance on American citizens or have operatives in the United States, which is the reason why the CIA still to this day cannot admit that they had close connections to Rahman, because he was inside the United States. And they're the ones who gave him the U.S. visa. Because also to add, when he got his visa at the embassy in Egypt, it was a CIA agent that gave him personally.
Yeah, it was actually Frank Weissner's son, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yes, it was. Right. But remember also, too, the CIA knows what's going on, and they needed covert information. They knew that they were breaking U.S. law, regulatory law, by having Rahman still as an operative, still as a close, open contact inside the United States. But they can't admit, right? But they needed that information. That information from the blind sheikh can't be shared with the FBI. Why? Because it's illegal to have an operative working inside the United States, because the CIA is not permitted, not allowed to conduct covert, collect human intelligence concerning the activities of U.S. citizens. That's
Okay.
the reason why the CIA had a distant relationship with the FBI and couldn't share the information.
Well, one point that I think goes against, for me, like goes against the idea that the FBI were being held back in some way, is that I can't see the interface, the contact points where that would happen, right? So, like, no one from the FBI has come out and said, yeah, we couldn't proceed with this because we received pressure from the CIA, right? And people like Carson Dunbar look like, well, basically villains at the end of this, right?
Sure.
And you would think that if he was getting instructions from on high, there's always this chance he's going to blow the whistle on that and say, hey, I wasn't this incompetent fool. I was under orders for national security, that there was some great operation going on. And I don't see that at any point, right? That doesn't seem to come out. So, I mean, again, that takes me to my limit of the understanding of the whole area, right? So I can't really speak beyond that. I'm just highlighting what will be obvious to me, like in I don't see how the CIA will be restricting.
Right. In regards to Dunbar, by the way, who was in charge of the FBI field office in New York, he actually makes the situation worse for Emad Salem, because when he gets to that position, Dunbar, he changes the contract with Emad Salem. He forces Emad Salem to accept a new contract, which he doesn't do anyway. He says that Emad Salem must wear a wire. He must testify against the members of the Al Farouk Mosque and the Blind Sheikh, and there's no stipulation regarding to that. Emad Salem has a huge argument with him and states that the reason why they did that so that they can ruin the investigation itself. He thinks it's manipulative that he does this. He actually nefarious. He thinks that Carson Dunbar is someone who either wants him out as a contact within the FBI, or that he's trying to set him up to use the information to get rid of him altogether.
Yeah.
I know that he thinks that he actually wants to be killed or something like that.
So here's my point, Adam. When I think the first book on 9/11 I read was Mike Rupert's Crossing the Rubicon, right? And he talked about the CIA having assets within the FBI who would play like a vital role at certain junctions to make sure certain investigations got suppressed and plots could go ahead, right? And if you zoom out and look at it from a distance, you could say, well, like a Carson Dunbar figure, okay, well, what if he was like a CIA asset and this, like, someone wanted whatever the Blind Sheikh's plot was to go ahead, and you've got someone who's there actively sabotaging at every step of the way, and that kind of makes sense. And then you zoom in and you think, well, I don't know, because to do that, he's got to basically have his reputation ruined and look like a complete fool, malevolent even, and maybe just incompetence, racism, sexism, total arrogance are better explanations for why Dunbar did what he did.
Right. Well, I don't have concrete evidence that the CIA contacted Dunbar, had any contact with him whatsoever at a future related date. I can say this, that he actually is somebody who's had contact with high-level, he had contacts within the FBI that had affiliations with the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, whether you want to connect the dots to say that he might have tried to manipulate or tried to intervene in the attacks itself, I'll leave that up to you. But he does become he becomes the superintendent of the New Jersey State Police later on. He's currently working as the senior vice president of Mutual of America. He's been there for 17 years now, Carson Dunbar. So he does have contacts in high places later on. But yeah, I mean, I share your concern regarding Dunbar and why he would try to force Emad Salem to become, to have Emad Salem outed, so to speak, and have his wife, his children, his family in Egypt affected by this. Because if he testifies, he's done for, and his family's killed because they live in Egypt, and they could be killed by either like the Egyptian Islamic Jihad or the Gamma Islamiyah, which is the Blind Sheikh came from. But it really makes you concerned as to why Dunbar himself does this and changes the contract with Emad Salem. But I think also, too, that he doesn't like Nancy Floyd. I brought that up before. Yeah. He doesn't trust Nancy Floyd itself in their relationship with that. But I think that's trivial in itself. I think there was that Dunbar himself could have been pressured by somewhere higher up to.
Sure. And I go down this line because I think, you know, depending on whether you're a conspiracy theorist or an incompetence theorist, you're going to see this question two different ways. And I think it's going to become relevant again if we talk about Alex Station and why decisions were made there to monitor and not monitor Islamic terrorists. And if we talk about someone like Sybil Edmonds, the whistleblower from the FBI, and why she was prevented from pursuing certain lines of investigation and things she was highlighting, these kind of questions of like, are people acting from a place of conspiracy or incompetence, are going to come up again and again. So I just want to put them on the table when, as and when they do. You know,
but you're gonna, especially when we talk about 9/11.
Yeah.
About the Bin Laden issue station, codename Alex Station. Yes, we're definitely going to see a much more definitive aspect between two agencies, the FBI, the CIA. And you're going to see how these two agencies competed for information and how one agency seemed so much more nefarious than the other. Because I know that there are other people out there who don't trust the FBI and that they see them as a nefarious agency, so to speak. But with 9/11, you're going to see the CIA as a much more existential threat to the American citizenry and the FBI. Even though the FBI does play a part in like suppressing information later on, but before 9/11, the CIA is absolutely complicit in it, and we'll talk about that in future.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adam. We'll leave it there, and back next time for the landmarks plot and the return of Emad Salem into this theatre and the arrest of some of the people we've been talking about so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you.